Let's go ahead and get started with our session A. Our first speaker today is Alexa Nightingale. Alexa is going to be talking about, actually she was working with me, she'll be talking about the study of superconductivity in carbon nanotubes and Pnictides by LFMA and ESR techniques.
This summer I studied superconductivity in carbon nanotubes and Pnictides by LFMA and ESR techniques. We will go over the theory of superconductivity, the method of LFMA and ESR, and the results of the Pnictides and HOPG. Superconductivity occurs when a material loses all electrical resistance and shows the Mesmer effect. The Mesmer effect is when a material expels magnetic fields. The floating magnet is an example of the Mesmer effect because the superconductor underneath is expelling the magnetic fields around it. So the magnet is floating. It's just like if you put two North Face magnets side by side, they repel. Superconductivity occurs when the temperature is below a so-called critical temperature, or TC, as well as below the critical field and the critical current. The BCS theory was developed to describe superconductivity. The basic concept of the theory is Cooper pairs. Cooper pairs are two electrons that join together and help each other through the material. So if one runs into the material, the other one helps pull it through. That pairing leads to zero resistance. That also leads to a critical temperature because if the thermal energy or heat rises to a certain point, then the Cooper pairs no longer stay together. There are two types of superconductors. Type 1 is described by the BCS theory. It expels all magnetic fields, as shown with the black lines. Type 2 superconductor, though, also expels magnetic fields, but it has areas called vortexes where the magnetic field actually goes through, the red lines. Because of the vortices, we can actually measure a type 2 superconductor with the LFMA method. While we know the theory behind type 1, we do not know the exact theory behind type 2. Type 2 superconductors have more practical applications because they have a higher critical field and sometimes have a higher critical temperature. One of the methods we use is low field microwave absorption, or LFMA. In a low field scan, the sample is placed in the cavity and exposed to standing microwaves, or microwaves that if seen would look like they're not moving. The temperature is ideally kept constant while the magnetic field is swept from -50 to 50 Gauss. Earth's magnetic field is equal to 1/2 of a Gauss. The microwaves excite the vortices and causing them to lose energy, which then show up on the scans. The other method we use is electron spin resonance, or ESR. It's similar to a low field, except the magnetic field ranges from 0 to about 6,000 Gauss. At these high temperatures, the differences between the energy levels allow for resonant absorption at certain magnetic fields. This reveals the presence of different types of charge carriers with so-called different G values. This matters to us because bound electrons have different G values than free electrons. Free electrons are needed to carry an electric current and therefore needed for superconductivity. Pnictides are materials that contain an element from the nitrogen group. In this gallium sample, one of the Pnictides that we investigated over this summer, there were 3 distinct low-field signals. The first two, the Josephson-Johnson-like behavior and the Fluxon-like behavior, are both evidence of superconductivity. They also both show that there was 2 different ways that the vortexes oscillate within the material also. The third scan shows ferromagnetism. This is the ESR scan of the same sample. Here you can see that there's actually different peaks that show the different charge carriers. You have a broad peak, which is the ferromagnetism, and then narrow peak, which are just electrons. We also did boron-doped HOPG by ion implantation, which is where ion beam eradicates the sample and implants the boron ions into the HOPG. HOPG is basically highly orientated graphite, which is different from normal graphite because it has no stacking faults. So it would be as if half of the orange plane was missing, or if you're looking from the top, two layers were perfectly aligned and not staggered. This is a picture of the HOPG under in SEM. The flat part is the HOPG, and the parts that are raised are just the edges of it. These are some low field scans of boron-doped HOPG. This was interesting because we saw a ferromagnetic signal, which you'd only expect of iron or another ferromagnetic element. Boron is not. You can also tell that just with a little bit more doping, the signal strongly changes. You can also see that the signal strongly changes here. Again, you have different peaks from narrow and broad. This is good for us because the different types of doping allow us to figure out the optimum doping for a material. In conclusion, the LFMA and ESR are powerful tools in detecting superconductivity because of how sensitive they are to the changes in the material, and as well as they can detect small amounts of superconductivity in a material also. The Pnictides we investigated were previously unknown, and so superconductivity and ferromagnetism together. Typically, you only see superconductivity and ferromagnetism mutually exclusive because they both require different types of electrons. The HOP, after doping with boron, did not show superconductivity, however it did develop ferromagnetism, which was a very unexpected result.
All right, any questions for Alexa? Any questions? I had one. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about the Josephson junctions and fluxon, what that's actually doing inside the material.
Josephson junction is where you have two superconducting layers on top of each other. And in the middle, you have an insulating layer. So the vortices, they stay trapped in there? They stay trapped in there. So you have a sharp peak. While with flexons, when you changing the magnetic field, it takes some time for the magnetic field for the sample to actually feel the magnetic field change in the middle. So the flexon is just basically of the fact that it takes time for the sample to feel the changes in the middle.
Okay, good. Any other questions for Alexa? No questions? Okay, well, let's thank our speaker one more time.